streaming.
We
Okay.
live.
We are supposedly live, yes.
Okay. Let me refresh the page.
Yes, we are. Okay.
We are indeed live. Good.
Hopefully my mic is not too low. That's the only thing I can say.
It's probably fine.
It's at max, so I mean, it's not like I can do anything else.
It's probably fine. Don't worry about it.
Right, guys? Right? Anyways, welcome everyone who is listening. Well, probably nobody yet, but you know, people will start trickling in eventually. Welcome to the episode 6 of the Daybreak podcast. I'm your host B, Killer Kimstar. B. I'm your host B, and today I have a chilling guest, if I may say so myself. His name is Kobra, and he's my caretaker in Daybreak Translations. You know, very important role.
Yeah, I definitely am the one who's responsible for making sure you don't go insane on a regular basis.
I shit myself on a constant basis, and Kobra is the one who needs to clean after. You know, it's a difficult job, but you know, an honorable one, if I may say so myself.
Hello.
So yeah, today we are having him and we're gonna interview him about most of the. It's just gonna be questions that I ask most of the people who come to this podcast, but you know how it is. A classic, a hood classic, right, Kobra? I mean, we probably talked about most of this stuff already, you and I, but you know, our job is to teach the normies, you know, about the
I am
secrets.
100% sure that you are very well aware of what my answers to all of these questions are. We
Okay.
have known each other now for well over a year, coming up on 2, and I'd be very surprised if you didn't already know the answer to every single one of these questions, but who knows? I might actually surprise you and throw you a curveball. I
True,
probably
true,
will.
true. Okay, then, well, let's start with the easy questions, Kobra. What are your 3 favorite BNs, and why?
You started with the hardest question.
What do you mean?
It's just when you've been in this community as long as I have, when you've read as many visual novels as I have, you have a hard time deciding. But I'll do my best. So
this guy.
I would say in no particular order. My 3 favorites are usually the one that I played first because it has a big impact on me. The one that I enjoyed the most, and then the one that kind of threw me a curveball and really got me hooked into the medium. So I would say the one that I played first, for anybody who is interested, and probably most people would be able to relate to this, because I believe it's a pretty common entry point, is Grisaya, and specifically the fruit of Grisaya. I got introduced to Grisaya in a very weird way, though. I don't think many other people got into it this way. My introduction to Grisaya was through I have, as some of you may know, I have a very deep history with Japanese music and how much I just kind of enjoy it and archive it and stuff like that. And I was a big fan of Fei-Lan growing up, and her track, which I believe was Shumatsu no Fractal, I think is what it's called, if I'm not mistaken, for the opening for Fruit of Grisaya, was what got me hooked on the series, because I didn't know it was connected to a game. I just thought, oh hey, that's a really cool kind of easy melodic song, and the hook of it is really kind of powerful. It reminds me of a lot of her other songs that got popular in various other ways. Some people actually probably know Fei-Lan best through her work with Mirai Nikki in particular, because she did the opening and the ending for the second half of the first season, but that's a whole other topic. Grisaya, I think really what I enjoyed the most about it, and what really kind of got me hooked on it, was how well they handled the character drama towards the end with the varying different routes. It's usually, with a lot of games, there's varying ways to handle character-driven storytelling, and in Grisaya I thought that was very unique, that they specifically handled it in ways that really kind of impacted the player, and it did things with the story that you really would never have expected, because it really kind of lulled you into that sort of false, moege sense of security with the common route, which is infamously long. And then it just kind of slaps you upside the head with borderline Nakige, I would say, in certain routes. Well, actually, all of the bad endings are pretty close to that, but that's, if you've read, you know what I'm talking about. So that is definitely one I would say that's probably my favorite in terms of just the way it was my first, so obviously, the storytelling was really impactful to me. I'm going to specifically say for my favorite, it's the Fruit, because I believe Fruit had the best thing going for it, and if I had to guess, I really don't think that the producers and developers of that series really thought it would get as popular as it did, because when you go into Labyrinth, you get all of your after stories, and then you get this really long grand route about Yuji's past, and then there's Eden, and nobody really likes Eden for a lot of reasons, because continuity wise it's really weird, and then we don't talk about Phantom Trigger, we just pretend that doesn't exist. So
Nice.
yeah, that's my take on Grisaya, despite the fact that I also have a bit of a beef with Grisaya, because that was the first visual novel I ever bought on Steam. And we all know how Steam handles visual novels, so to say I didn't get the first experience, or the best experience on my first read-through, is kind of an understatement, because that novel is very famous for lots of heavy censorship that it employed, on top of removing, just really weird ways of removing lewd jokes, which, again, why? I later bought it through Denpasoft, though, and got the proper experience, so very glad to have had that.
Guys, have you listened to that? He buys visual novels. What a loser.
Well, okay, now look.
Just
buying
kidding.
visual novels, buying visual novels through Steam, is probably not the best way to go through things. For anybody who is, I guess, unaware, try to buy it from the publisher if you're going to buy it. So, like for example, Manga Gamer, Nekonyan, and I believe Jast all have independent storefronts. Buy it through them, because you're never going to get the full experience on Steam. There are actually novels that you're not even going to be able to get on Steam. Best case I can think of is Rants. Rants is really good, despite the fact that it has, let's just say it's a good thing that Twitter hasn't found it yet, but it's a really good series, especially if you kind of like, RPG style games. Rants has a pretty good style of storytelling as well as the RPG elements, especially if you like classic ones. So definitely check that out if that's something you think you'd be interested in.
Okay, so Rants, Grisaya,
well, and then we can keep going. I didn't mean to have Rants on the list. It just my sort of tangent brain just went there.
Oh, but, no, then by all means, Grisaya, and
then the next one I would say is the one that kind of impacted me the most as, playing it, which is Totino, which I think other people...
Really?
I know. No, let me explain.
Okay.
So, Totino, I know this is a very divisive topic, and I know that's kind of like an almost normie title, but not really. I actually read Totino before I read Doki Doki Literature Club, and I think honestly those games have very similar concepts in them, and I'm not going to spoil for people who haven't read them, but let's just say they're sort of similar on a very, very surface level. Totino's mechanic of how it handles player interaction, I think that's the best way I can say it without spoiling it, is, I would argue, far superior to the way Doki Doki Literature Club tried to do it, and I also think that, it's worth saying that Totino did come first. However, it would be really disingenuous for me to say that one copied the other, because I don't truly believe that was what happened, and if you dissect those games at a more meta level, you can sort of understand how they sort of reached the same conclusion through different means. But I really think that Totino really kind of drew me into what is possible with a visual novel, and more importantly, it really described to me and gave me an understanding of how visual novels can impact a person, just on a personal level, with all of the things that are actually possible through creative, narrative storytelling. And also just very creepy moments that would definitely make you very unsettled playing them. Like, you really, if you go into it completely blind, which is what I recommend you do, you will definitely not expect a lot of the story beats that happen if you play it the right way, which there's a right way and a wrong way to play Totino, and I really only think the wrong way that you could do it would be to give yourself a guide and try to play through it that way, because a lot of the creative sort of surprises, I guess, will be lost on you. So that's one that I would definitely recommend. And the other one, and I know you knew this was coming, you knew I knew this was coming, is Muv-Luv. And specifically, I would have to say it's Muv-Luv Alternative for the actual novel that's better. And there is a big debate in, the fandom of whether or not Extra Verse is better or Alternative Verse is better, but I think Alternative really is the better novel from a narrative perspective, because while Extra, I think, really does a very good job of describing and sort of doing storytelling in a very sort of interesting and interactive way, Extra ultimately is, and I really hate to say this because it's going to prove your point that we have argued back and forth numerous times, dated. You have to sort of understand that Extra was written in 2003. So a lot of the tropes that Extra uses by our standards are very dated, but if you look at it through the lens of this game out 20 years ago, you then sort of start to understand, oh, these things were new at this time. And you start to get a little bit more of an appreciation for the, modes of storytelling, the creative sort of cut-ins. Like there's a scene early on, this isn't a spoiler, this is just funny. There's a scene where they basically just rip off Initial D with Maya's limousine driver. And you get in the car with your science teacher and she starts racing him down the hill in this massively long limousine, and it's all done through like manga style cutouts almost, like kind of like how Fooly Cooly did some of their scenes in the original series episodes. It's just very inventive and ingenious ways of representing its humor like that. And also just from a English person's perspective, the translation is extremely high quality for Extra and Unlimited and Alternative. The reason I say Alternative is better, though, even though Muv-Luv is what it is because I think that the overall sense and theme of what they're trying to tell you is much more impactful in that story, where the overarching lesson is that, even in humanity's darkest hour, we can band together and overcome trials, no matter how hopeless things are. The key message of Alternative has always been hope, even in, trying times. And I think that is a message that is very easy to resonate with people, especially in the modern day where you have a lot of, things happening in the world that aren't so great. And I think that's always been something that's, been going on throughout human history. It's just people are terrible. But Alternative in particular really does a good job of sending that message home. And I think when the series eventually concludes, because Alternative is technically not over, Integrate still has to come out to wrap the story up. I think that once you sort of dig into the universe more and understand more about how this universe works, there's a plethora of side content that you can go through, and people are like, oh, well, it's just side stories. Well, yes, but in this case, the side stories actually matter, where they're constructed in such a way that the universe can really just wrap around and give you a very, very deep and sort of well thought out, well planned out universe for you to explore and understand. And I think that experience alone is part of the reason why visual novels still work as a medium. You can do things in a visual novel that you would never be able to do in any other medium, which is kind of why most of the Muv-Luv anime, unfortunately, is not the best, because they unfortunately just, with the time constraints and the constraints of the medium, have to sacrifice stuff. And there's only a certain amount of content you could fit. I mean, we've also, bounced this idea off each other when we were talking about Schwarzesmarken, where with Schwarzesmarken, you can't do the anime in 12 episodes because there's a lot. You end up getting a very Cliff Notes abridged version of the story. You don't really get a kind of full picture of what the actual story has to tell. So that's my 2 cents, and those are overall my 3 favorite games in a very long-winded and sort of tangent-y answer.
Okay, but my question is, just to give everyone like context on the question I'm going to make, Kobra suffers the EOP obsession of he likes the novel very much, right? But he hasn't read it yet. And the one I'm gonna mention is Kimi no Uso, okay? It was gonna come up eventually. You just told me.
Discuss this.
You already told me that the alternative verse is supposedly better, but if Kimi no Uso and that line of, and that other alternative universe you believe is superior, not superior, but you like their games better for sure, then why do you say the alternative verse is better? Is it because it hasn't been released yet?
Well, no. I would argue the alternative verse is simply better because I don't, from what I know of Kimi no Zo, and screw you, by the way, I have watched the anime, so I do know the story.
I mean, okay, I'll give you that. I meant exclusively the game in this.
I have
this
not
case.
played the game. Yes, I can't read the game because,
Yet.
unlike, contrary to popular opinion, my Japanese is not good enough to understand that.
Yet.
Yet. That will come up. We'll have more on that later. But I from what I know of Kimi no Zo, Kimi no Zo is, for lack of a better term and way to describe it, I'll just describe it for everybody who doesn't know what the story is. I can say it is White Album 2 before White Album 2 really got its wings, so to speak. Like, Kimi no Zo came out in 2000, White Album 2 came out in, what, 2011? 12?
Kimi no
maybe?
Zo? I don't know.
No, White Album 2.
Oh.
I forget when White Album 2 came out. It was probably earlier than that, but I just don't know off the top of my head. Anyway,
came
the
out
point
in
is...
2011, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So, yeah, Kimi no Zo came first, and Kimi no Zo, the whole point of the story kind of revolves around this love triangle that's established between, you know, a girl in school and the, you know, Osanajimi, your childhood friend. It's that archetype, but again, remember, this was 23 years ago. That archetype was not something that was really well established in any form of media yet. So, this was very, very inventive stuff, and on top of the love triangle, on top of the crazy mid-game twist, on top of just the really depraved shit you can do in that game that you can do in later sections, I would say that it was definitely one of the most inventive titles of its time, hands down. It just blew any other competition out of the water because there was nobody doing these things at that time, and I would argue it laid the groundwork for a lot of other romantic love triangle sort of storytelling elements that came up later in other games, like the most notable of them being White Album 2. Sankaku Ranai is another example. You know, there's various other titles that have really done that sort of that idea for their storytelling, but maybe have a little bit of a different spin on it. White Album 2 is definitely more like a soap opera than Kimi no Zo obviously is, and Sankaku Ranai is much more on like a moege side of things than Kimi no Zo was. Kimi no Zo truly is a beast in and of itself, and then when you think of also the fact that it is not only a prequel to Muv-Luv, but it also stacks on top of this other larger sort of extended universe, you really have a lot of things to work with. And of course, Kimi no Zo characters end up reappearing in Alternative, you would not understand a lot of the deeper context and things that they talk about without having read Kimi no Zo, which is why I'm glad that eventually, I do believe, who knows when eventually is, but it will see a release stateside. It's just a matter of when. But who knows? Honestly, I would much rather have Kimi Ita localization, but that's never happening.
Well, the company is notoriously slow with releases, so you know,
yeah,
I wouldn't hold my breath.
Ages time be ages time.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they put it out in the end, who cares, right?
Oh, they will.
That's what matters.
They will. It's just a matter of, again, when. They've been promising this for the past 10 years, so don't hold your breath.
Okay, then leaving the meme topic aside, of course, what is your favorite character, male and female, of a visual novel that you have read so far?
Okay, you're probably gonna actually have a bit of a surprise for this. I would say my favorite male character is probably Kaito Asagiri from the Akatsuki series.
Oh.
And I think I'm a bit biased, though, because my enjoyment from Kaito comes with being able to have a backseat to a lot of his experiences and also write a lot of his experiences through the editing. I very much enjoy the sort of absolute insanity and wide breadth of sort of personalities that Kaito can, you know, accomplish throughout his sort of throughout his storytelling, and the way he sees things through his eyes is also absolutely hysterical. I have been able to do things with Kaito that I never thought I would have been able to do with a visual novel, and also when he needs to be just a complete, you know, fucking badass, he can be. But there are other times where he's also just an absolute jackass in various other ways. In particular, there was one scene that I don't think, well, no, you haven't read it yet because there's Guardians of Daybreak 2 isn't out, but there's a scene that will come up in Aya's route where his first idea to kill time at a mall is, hey, let's grab some kids and make them do escalator racing. Like, no other character that I have read or had the pleasure of reading is just so chaotic on such a base level that you literally have zero idea what they're going to do next. And that sort of idea of being able to read someone that really keeps you on your toes is one of the most interesting parts of visual novels, in my opinion. Like, it would be very hard to animate Akatsuki no Ge. You could do it, but I don't think you would really be able to accomplish just the sheer chaotic energy of the protagonist in a way that would really be meaningful. You'd have to sort of tone him down a little bit. And I think in doing so, you lose a lot of the originality that Kaito's character represents.
I mean, yeah, that game is nothing without the protagonist too.
If you had like a wallflower random bodyguard protagonist where like his only interest was like protecting people, then you would have a very boring, generic story. Kaito makes the story.
Pretty much. As for the female?
This one's a tough one, and I think honestly, in terms of female leads, or not even female leads, in terms of just female characters in general, you have such a wide variety to pick from that you really kind of have a sort of like hard way of really picking one. And I definitely have that dilemma too. I will say, if I had to pick one, just off the top of my head, would probably be Iristina Bernhardt from Schwarzmarken. And the reason for that is because she is very... She's very cunning. Well, yes, obviously she's hot. That helps. But like, she's very cunning. She's extremely intelligent. She's a very capable leader. Has an extremely interesting backstory. Just everything about her really ticks all the boxes in my eyes for good character writing and interesting character writing. And that's why I'm even more frustrated that she is the fucking canon ending. But alas, it was not to be. Unfortunately, for the rest of the story to continue, things have to happen to Iristina that are unfortunate, but we won't talk about that because I don't want to spoil everybody. The point is that I think in terms of favorite female lead of all the visual novels I've read, it's probably Iristina. I have yet to really experience a female character that is more dynamic and interesting in both their presentation and their acting, even, than Iristina.
Okay. I mean, that's very interesting. I think I agree with Kaito in a sense. Well, my favorite character is actually Igarashi, as for the male side.
Well,
but that's
Igarashi is an existence in and of himself.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that he, compared to other characters, he just makes cameo appearances, but he's a really interesting one. Otherwise, I would say Kaito. As for the female one, I don't know. I have no clue. Maybe I don't know what. I don't remember her name, but the main girl of Karen Shoujo was pretty good. I don't remember her name though.
I actually have not read Kari no Shoujo yet, and I really need to.
Oh, you haven't? It's a masterpiece, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like I've read. God, I don't read fan translations anymore, but the translation that came from that, which was originally from TL Wiki. I think it was a group within TL Wiki, but it was very, very good. Very, very good. One of the best I've read for sure. It's probably also biased because that's one of my first visual novels, but still. I would read the Manga Gamer translation. I don't know which one are they going to come out with now, but it might be good, but it will never be better than the one I read originally.
The new release is Shirofune translation. And by the way, I'm just going to put this out there real quick. The official translation of this title is not The Shell, it is Girl in the Shell. And the reason that was probably censored or trimmed to just The Shell is because they didn't want to run into copyright issues with Ghost in the Shell, but
no,
I digress.
I argue the reason they changed the title was because the original Karen Shoujo was banned from Steam. So if they change the title and the IP, then maybe they can sneak the title into Steam that way.
Oh,
that's pretty much the reason. Otherwise, I have no clue why. So yeah. Although let's see if it works out for them. I mean, if they can sneak Nukitashi into Steam, anything can sneak into Steam.
Okay, Nukitashi is not as overtly controversial because that gets by, I think, because most people don't really understand what Nukitashi actually really means. So you can sneak that by a censor.
It's literally just sex, bro. What do you mean?
Well, yes, I understand that, but most people don't understand like how Japanese sort of idiom works, and that's Nukitashi doesn't really have that connotation in English. Like you just hear the word and it doesn't really mean anything. But which is why I think it would be a lot easier to slip by a censor sort of under the door. My 2 cents.
Okay, well, it's your point of view. Let's put it that way. You just need to open the game 2 minutes and it's over. And
oh yeah, you'll understand exactly what this game is about.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm pretty sure they do it because they want to sneak it through Steam, but
well, the game's censored. Like 98% of the text is cut out. Like there's only 2,000 lines of text in the actual Steam version without a patch. They literally just cut everything out because how would you even knowing what I know about Nukitashi, how would you even push that through in a way that's sanitized for Steam? You can't. You actually can't. You just have to cut so much of the text out that it just isn't the game anymore. So I think that's literally what they did, and they're just like, okay, get the patch, and I guess that works. You'll buy it. That's the way to do it, I guess.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that's how it's gonna work, anyways. In the end, that's how it is with companies nowadays. I understand. I work for companies as well, and sometimes you just need to make the hard choices. You just need to censor, and that's it, and then offer the download patch.
Yeah. You cannot not sell a visual novel these days on Steam in an American market. It's just not possible. If you're not selling on Steam, you are missing out on... Actually, I will cite an interesting statistic that Meru from Love Lab actually posted on her Twitter a while ago. 96% of all of Love Lab sales are made through Steam. So... that goes to show you just how much of an influence Steam has on the modern gaming scape and the modern visual novel scape, and I think that, realistically speaking, if you're not selling a novel on Steam, you're not getting anywhere. What I do not like, however, is that Steam will not even allow you to tell other people that there's a patch, so inevitably someone is going to buy the game and be like, this sucks, because they don't know that there's a patch out there that you can use to actually put the proper content in the game. It's annoying, but it is what it is.
Well, I mean, yeah. Ultimately, fuck Steam. It's a shitty platform, but we'll have to abide by it. Just like a lot of publishers, book publishers and manga ones, abide by Amazon's rules because Amazon makes most of the sales.
Yeah, you kind of are stuck in a sort of situation where you just have to play by the big kids' rules. You're the small fish in the pond, and you gotta follow their rules if you want to exist on their platform. It's how it works.
Well, speaking of, how long, Kobra? How long have you been? Reading visual novels in total, amount of years,
Well, the difference between reading visual novels and engaging in Japanese media is a very big difference. I would say visual novels specifically, I probably started reading sometime in my early 20s, which would be
7 years ago,
I think. 2016, yeah, 7 years ago. That's about right. That's probably when I first read Gersaya, and that's when I first started with a lot of other titles too. And I was not as avid until I would say probably 2019, 2020 when lockdowns happened, because then I was able to kind of just really dig into it with a lot of the free time I had, and I tore through a lot of games in that time. A lot of backlog, a lot of stuff that came out in the past, and just stuff that I'd already kind of known about but never really went out of my way to read. In particular, Fate was a big one, obviously. Actually reading the Fate visual novel is, I still stand by this, the only proper way to really get into Fate if you really want to learn about the game and learn about the extended universe. As much of a time sink as it is, it's 80 hours, read the visual novel. Much better than the anime, much better storytelling than the anime. Just do it. Dedicate the time to it.
You'll get the
I understand that's
experience.
A big ask, but it's it's a lot better to have that sort of context of the visual novel behind it, because you understand a lot more about the character motivations, the story, and so on and so forth.
Remember, guys, if you want to take a good nap, you can read the visual novel of Fate.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
you and I are never going to agree on this.
It's so boring, Kobra. Come on.
It is not boring. It's no.
It's
I'm not going to agree with you. I'm not going to agree with you on this.
And you will not fall into the bait.
I will not.
Okay.
You are not baiting me in public.
Well,
you are not.
Then let's move on. Basically, you mentioned as well that you followed some the translation projects, right, on the side of things that you are interested in, like Eustia and other
absolutely.
things. Like any other projects besides Eustia, because I know you're big. You're waiting for Eustia with bated breath, but how about other stuff that you've been keeping your eye on?
Well, I think the most obvious one that I think is probably the most mainstream and everybody's been really keeping their eye on has been obviously Magi-TL, Magikoi translation. I've been around since I think I read Magikoi and Magikoi S and A1 in very quick succession, because when I had really gotten into this, A1 had just come out when I found Magikoi anyway. And then I've read A2. I don't think I've really gone through all of A3 yet, and I did read most of A4. And now I'm waiting for A5 whenever that comes out. And I'm looking forward to the same thing everyone else is looking forward to, which is Yoshitsune, obviously. So, Magi-TL is probably, I would argue, probably like the most successful TL project that I have ever really known. And I followed them for a while when it was going on. I followed, obviously, Sure Scans, which is why it was so cathartic, kind of, to work on a Ginara Haruka. The little bit that I did work on it, unfortunately, I didn't have as much of a role as I would have wanted, but that's, the way the chips fall. And also, other TL project, I would probably say...
Koike no Tome, maybe? Did you follow Koike no Tome, or not?
I did not.
Understandable.
I wasn't around. I think that just really was kind of on the back sort of burner for me. I will still definitely read it one day. It's just I didn't get to it. Another one that I'm really following is any sort of translation of the Ushali games, and I know how we feel about MTL here. But I would argue that at least the Amayue Labyrinth Meister game was not as horrific as some of the other earlier releases.
There was a human translation released not so long ago, quote unquote. I'm quoting this really hard, but Kamino Rhapsody is a human translation.
Yeah, Kamidori is a very good translation.
No, Kamino Rhapsody.
Oh, I don't think I heard of that one.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of Kamidori Alchemy Meister. That's what I'm thinking of.
No, it's not that. I'm talking about that one. Kamino Rhapsody. There was a human group. In fact, the guy wanted to do more games, but if I remember correctly, he got bullied out of the internet because he got the plebbit treatment or whatever. He got like a little bullied, and he couldn't handle the heat, so he just decided to drop translating altogether.
I will actually shill another project that I'm really looking forward to, which is because I got scammed earlier on in my life, which was Chushingura 46+1, and I got scammed because for anybody who doesn't know, don't buy that game on Steam. The reason for that is because when you buy that game on Steam, they do this funny thing where they split the visual novel up because it's originally all one game. They have the audacity to release episode 1, they call it, for free, which is really just like the first 2 hours of the game, and then they release episode 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 as like DLC for the game, which is a really stupid way to release a game like that anyway. But the other thing that really annoys the crap out of me is that they have the audacity to MTL the whole entire thing. Yeah, you're not reading an actual human, they just MTL'd the whole thing because they could not be bothered. And that is the most disgusting way of releasing a game that I can possibly think of. It is the most disrespectful thing you could possibly do, especially to a property that's as well respected as Chushingura. So there is a retranslation effort that going on right now that is actually translating it from the ground up. I downloaded the partial and I've read the partial, and I am blown away by how much better it is. So yes, if you are interested at all in reading Chushingura, I highly recommend you do. Definitely keep an eye on that translation project because it deserves all of the praise it's getting so far. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the final product because I got scammed and I don't want anybody else to.
You said before as well that Magi-TL is the most successful group and project or whatever. What makes it success? Like, what do you categorize as being successful?
I would categorize successful as not only being able to obviously finish your project, because you and I are both well aware of various efforts that have just gone down in flames over the years, but also not only keeping consistent with it, but actually putting out releases in, a way that everybody is satisfied with. Like, I really haven't seen many complaints about the quality of MagicTL releases, and I would argue that back in the day when they were really releasing, they were probably one of the highest quality release groups out there, simply because of the fact that they just put out extremely good work. And they have, very talented staff over there. They have very funny staff over there, and they also have a very good community sort of footprint, where a lot of people not only respect the games but learn about the games through their efforts. Like, I would have never been able to properly enjoy Magikoi were it not for them. And I do say that Magikoi is, again, this is why it's so hard for me to pick a favorite. One of my favorites out there, just because of the way it does not only storytelling in a very interesting, funny, way that will keep you engaged in the story, but also it's just absolutely wonderful to watch the character interactions with as big of a cast as you have, because it's very common that you'll have a game, and I think probably one of the best examples of a game that really falls hard into this trap is Shin Kohime Muso and Kohime Muso in general, where you have this gigantic cast of characters. It's very easy to kind of just forget about certain ones if you're not bringing them up constantly. And Magikoi does have a enormous cast, but on top of having an enormous cast, they also have a ton of like A-tier, talent for seiyus and voice actors that are very well known in other projects. If you look up, who is actually working on that and worked on that in the past, you'll find a lot of overlap with a lot of popular anime and other media that you probably know because you watched it. And there's also just a lot of very, not only the line's delivery, but also just the way that the characters interact with each other in very unexpected ways. Not only that, and also the fact that you can literally have a root for almost literally every single female character is, again, not something that people did a lot back in the day, because it just was not financially viable, and Magikoi just said, fuck it, we're going to do it anyway. And that's how you end up with 5 fan discs. So, that being said, Magikoi is a wonderful ride. Highly, 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 highly encourage people, if you have the time, to go out and read it. You will not be disappointed.
How long have they even been in the game right now?
How long have I been reading it, or how long has it been?
How long have MagicTL have been operating?
Oh, they've been operating for 10 years, easily. I think they're actually, their translation of Magikoi OG came out in 2013, so I would say it's been about 10 years, maybe longer, I had to guess.
Damn, that's a long time, alright, Jesus.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they've been at it for a very long time. I mean, translating 7 games is no small feat, and on top of that, translating massive games such as Magikoi and Magikoi S, because those games are enormous. They have hundreds of thousands of lines of text between the two of them. And translation alone of a project that big, even if you're working with multiple translators, is easily 1 year plus. Just the translation. Never mind the editing and other processes that you need to do. So, hats off to them. They did a fantastic job. And, hopefully they're going to release A+, you little gremlins, because I want to read those stories.
It'll come this year, right? A lot of things are coming this year.
A5 will come this year? A+?
A+?
Probably not.
No, A+. Didn't they already say that they were not going to work on A+?
They said they didn't say they wouldn't work on it. They said it's not likely. Which, again, I have my doubts about that. I think they're going to end up having to do it, because the thing is, they made everybody convert over when they did their patches to the packaged edition of the games, which includes A+. Before, they were just doing the individual fan discs, and they were patching those releases, but they converted it to the packaged edition, where it's like all of the games in one, plus the A+ games. So I think that that lends some credence to the idea that they're going to do A+, but I obviously don't speak for them. I don't know. I just really like to read it personally. So we'll see if that comes around. Maybe it will, maybe it won't.
It's gonna be a stacked year either way, because Eustia is coming out for sure. That game, Magikoi S, Sennohato is coming out, if I remember correctly.
Yep, Sennohato will come out soon.
Guardians of Daybreak is coming out. Yuzuki is coming out eventually.
Eventually. If I can get you to stop playing gacha games.
True. Iru, please stop playing Tears of the Kingdom. Finish.
Please stop, Iru.
Release
God
us from
damn
the
it.
pain.
We have to finish this, dude. Come on. So yeah, that's how Ginirdo's going for anybody who's interested.
I mean, it's over it's over half done. It's just it's going a little slower than anticipated, but it is what it is.
Unfortunately.
This is what happens when you deal with translation projects. You just most of the times it depends on the whims of a person, and if that person is inconsistent for whatever reason, sometimes
I mean,
shit
I can't.
happens. Then
I don't really have a leg to stand on either, because unfortunately the reason Guardians of Daybreak 2 has taken so long is because I took a 6-month detour to re-edit and QA Akatsuki no Goe 1. So for anybody who may have missed the previous announcements, when Akatsuki 2 comes out, Akatsuki 1 has been completely redone from the ground up. So have fun with that. It's a better experience if you haven't read it.
Well, you say that, but you started editing when exactly? Game 2, like February, maybe?
No, it was in late December, early January, and then I got stuck on Giniro QA for a month, and then I had to start up again. So we lost a month somewhere in there. No, we lost 2 months somewhere in there because I had other official stuff that I had to do for a month, and then I had Giniro QA in the month of like January to early February, and then we just so that was why Tsuki took so long. It really shouldn't have. Then I was able to chunk through Moe pretty quickly. That was a very short, easy route. Then I think I did Aya, which took a little longer because, again, life decided to take a little bit of a turn. And was able to get Tai and Sun's story done in a relatively short amount of time. And now I'm at Reika. And that is going to be hopefully done by the end of the month. And then I can finish Anzu. And that will probably be done sometime late July, early August. And then I can just whip the QA boys a little, and the game will be out. But we'll see. I'm trying to get this game out this summer. No promises,
Kobra
but I'm gonna try my damnedest.
Kobra is on a mission. He needs to release Game 2 before August 10th, or otherwise he will get attacked by the ghosts of the past.
Bro, what?
Nothing. I just wanted to make it funny.
Remember the part where neither of us are funny?
What do you mean, man? I'm hilarious.
Whatever. I'll get it. I'll try my best to get it out by the end of the summer. I am the one that is holding it up, but
it's all your fault, Kobra.
Yeah, it's all my fault. But it will be out soon. I promise. It will definitely be out this year. It will most likely be out by the end of the summer. That's all I'm going to say about that, because I don't want to commit to a hard release date, because we did that in the past and it didn't work so well, so we're not going to do that again. It's ready when it's ready.
If something happens, we just patch it again, right, guys?
I mean, I'm glad that we're working on the Trinity Edition, because that means we can actually just do Akatsuki over again, which was very helpful for my own sanity, because I was not happy when that game came out.
Look, the Majiro versions of the game are a pain in the ass to work with anyways. The UI is ugly. The aspect ratio sucks. But I mean, that's what I played back when I started this game. I played with the Majiro version. So the Trinity edition for those who have already played the originals like me, it's a very welcome experience for sure.
There's also I heard Shumatsu was also very much changed from the Majito version to the current configuration. So if you have read the Majito version, I highly encourage you to read the Trinity edition. And we'll also get to that soon. B is currently going insane trying to translate it, and I'll probably start editing that before the year's out. I definitely will. My plan is actually to just, as soon as I'm done with Game 2, just balls deep straight into Game 3, and that'll probably go well. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, Kobra wants to go insane right after Game 2. I mean, look, that sounds exactly like what I do anyways, so by all means, go all in.
Looking forward to it, honestly. I really want to get Game 2 done with, because Game 3 is a much better game just overall. Although I am enjoying the comedy of Game 2 very much, I will say. I have had a lot of fun writing a lot of these jokes. For those of you who have seen some of those jokes, you know what I'm talking about. I'd actually argue, though, a lot of the root previews that are up on this channel, completely different experience that you're going to get when it's done. So, I would recommend reading it. Don't rely on the previews we had here, because they are absolutely previews. Everything in that is subject to change 100% and has been very heavily changed. So when you read it when you read it for yourself, you'll have a different experience, and I think you'll really enjoy it. I worked really hard on the jokes. Everyone here in this team worked really hard on the jokes. So I think for comedy purposes, they're good. For story purposes, they're kind of but we really can't do too much on that front. So is what it is.
Speaking of the funny comedy, what do you think are some of the biggest, challenges you have to face when working on something like this scope,
The bane of my fucking existence is kanji puns.
Oh.
Because there is just no way to properly convey those in English. Like, you ultimately end up having to sort of replace the joke in a way that makes sense. Like, the only way I found really to accurately translate a kanji pun is, well, not even translate, I guess localize, really, because you can't translate it, because it just translates to the same thing. The only way I have kind of really reasoned out how to do that is if something is said, I think a great example of this, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but it's really not. In Tai's route, there is a joke where Kaito says he would never want to marry Suki, he'd rather marry Sun instead. And Tai just goes, Tai and Suki go bara, which is like gay. And Tai says bara in hiragana, and the way Suki says it is it bara in kanji. And bara in kanji is more like rose. It's more like kind of like the stereotypical BL image of like a guy with a rose in his mouth very close to another dude. And the implication is that it's like an erotic homosexual relationship, even when it's really not. So the only way I found to do that is like for both of them kind of to say like, I think I had Tai say like homo, like, and then cut herself off, and then Suki said, I think forbidden love or something like that. I think that's how I did that. And that's like the only way I could think of to do it, like where you have one person say like a more casual version of the word and then another person say a more formal version of the word, because kanji is typically used in more formal, keigo type of atmospheres. So that's how that tends to work. You have to be ultimately though, you have to be very creative with how you handle those things, because it's very hard to do that. Like, for example, great example of this is if by some astral miracle the stars align and someone does a translation of Suryotsu, which is a novel if you're not familiar with that work.
It might be
that
me.
Game,
it might be me.
It might be you. I don't know. Don't commit to that, because
high chance it's me.
The hounds will come after you, but good luck. Anyway,
spoiler alert, there's a high chance I will be the one translating the Suryotsu games, but go on.
If you do, I will make you do Otomeryuron, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, the point is that game is a very good example of kanji puns extraordinaire, because that game not only has a lot of really well-written humor, but it also has humor that's written in a way that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to Western audiences. Like, there's characters who use like wrong sentence terminators because they don't know Japanese very well, and that's like a way of like, being funny. There's other characters that like there's the cross-dressing maid, for example, who uses like B, I think you said, as like the sort of initial kanji to like describe beautiful things, and that's just like the way that's like one of his character quirks, is like everything has to be beautiful to him, so the way he speaks sort of capitalizes on that. Very difficult things to translate into English, because those concepts don't exist in the English language, so you ultimately have to figure out, okay, how do I localize this? And you kind of have to be like a scholar in both languages to really piece together how this works. It's going to be very tough if we do it. But we might. I don't know. The one thing we're definitely not doing is Oetsuba, because fuck that game.
Oh, yeah.
Holy shit.
Nah. That shit is too complicated for me.
It is. Yeah, it's on the level of... It's quite literally, when people say untranslatable kamige, that's probably one of the things that comes to mind is Oetsuba.
The hardest
Very good game. Very good game, but you need to be like a Japanese scholar and then an English scholar to kind of understand how that sort of concept translates into English. Like, if there was ever a game where you could like have tips to like translator note stuff, that would be it. But I digress.
Well,
not something you can do.
I even considered if I were ever to do a Suryotsu translation, I would definitely need translation notes.
We're probably gonna have a glossary if we ever do that, but that's for another day.
Well,
I don't want to talk about that
right now. Well, the games already, the Suryotsu games all have glossary functions, so it's fine.
We could do something, but
yes.
We'll get to that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Oh yeah, that's another matter for another day, specifically next year. But
Yeah, absolutely.
we'll see what happens if I'm even in a mental state befitting of continuing in the first place.
Don't worry, B. I will keep you sane.
Thank you.
I will
Very
make
cool.
sure. I will make sure I squeeze at least one more out of you before Shumatsuron is over.
He will never let me die.
I won't. I'm having too much fun with this.
Well, so the main challenges you're saying are jokes, right? Basically.
Jokes are absolutely the most challenging part of my job. Being able to convey them in a way that is not only funny, but also English speakers can understand. Making the humor land is, without a question, the hardest part of editing. It's just, you have to really kind of know what you're doing. And my job is really to just furnish the Japanese in a way that is more palatable for English speakers to read. And ultimately, I think I succeed at that job. I think when you read Akatsuki's rework, as well as Akatsuki 2, you'll definitely have a pretty good handle on how editing goes. Also, I'm not responsible for Guniro, so don't yell at me for that. That is Yuri's problem.
Don't be too insane, Kobra. Don't you think pacing is also an issue?
Pacing is a problem. So pacing is not necessarily an editing problem, it is the way the story is written. Because that's just ultimately how the stories are sometimes written. Like, for example, I think the pacing in Suki's route is god-awful, especially in Akatsuki 2, because you go from 0 to 100 in these instances really fucking quick. And you don't really give time for characters to really understand how things are going. Like, the whole problem in Suki's route is that she basically just avoids Kaito, which, not really the way we left things off. And on top of that, there's also the weird thing that happens at the end of Suki's route in Game 1. The pacing of that route is just all off. And I am annoyed because Suki is one of my favorite characters in that game, and I don't like how that game is really, how that route is really written. I think Kunigasa definitely did her a little dirty, and I'm annoyed by that. But there's nothing you can really do. The biggest thing about translation is ultimately remaining as faithful to the game as you possibly can, and it's very difficult to do that with Akatsuki because some of the writing beats are just terrible, but they are what they are. I think honestly, so far, from what I've read, I've really enjoyed Moe's routes the most. Tai's routes have been an exercise in patience. Suki's humor and the character interactions in that route are fantastic, but the plot points ultimately fall through because Suki's there for comedy, but she doesn't really work well as a heroine. Reika's routes are unquestionably the best written. You can tell who Kinigasa's favorite was, and Aya very much feels like an afterthought.
You would be surprised to know the favorite of Kinugasa, actually. It's
really?
It's definitely not Reika. No.
Really?
It's actually...
Is it one of the...
It's Tai, actually.
It's Tai? Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah. His favorite character
His favorite
Tai.
is the... Oh my god. His favorite's the Gremlin. No.
Yes,
why?
Yes. You, I mean...
She's so badly written, though. Her route in Game 1 sucks. And her route in Game 2 isn't better. It's just... Oops, I magically know how to solve this problem because it was read to me in a bedtime story. Motherfucker, get out of here.
Well, this is something I'll probably release after Game 3 is out or while Game 3 is being produced. But there is a very interesting interview between Kinugasa, the producers, and Tomose Shunsaku, which is the illustrator, in the special art book of Akatsuki that was released exclusively for the physical version, which I happen to have. So I'll probably translate that. And in that interview, both the illustrator and Kinugasa state their favorite characters. If I remember correctly, Tomose's favorite was Suki, without a shadow of a doubt, and Kinugasa's favorite was Tai.
I can understand Suki being the favorite character just because of a lot of things about her. She's very interesting on multiple levels, but the plot threads just don't connect well. And ultimately, again, you have the Kinugasa special where we can't write a satisfying ending because that would be a problem. So...
yeah, that's kind of an issue this writer has,
yeah.
right? Well, it'll be more apparent in the third game where there's... How many endings did we count again? Like...
Oh, fuck.
12?
I think 11? No, is it 12? Well, okay. Well, hang on.
A lot of endings.
It's, yeah. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4... 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13... No, it's 12. It's 12.
Okay.
Those aren't extra endings. It's 12.
So yeah, it's 12 endings. So yeah, I mean,
It's a lot. It's
about the journey, not the end goal, I suppose. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I think the canon heroine, though, of Akatsuki is without a question Reika.
Oh no,
but-
no. Without a shadow of a doubt, it has been confirmed multiple times that Reika is the canon heroine. So yes.
I mean, the way the story is lined up, though, and kind of tease her up in a lot of ways, it makes the most sense.
Even in
for Reika to be-
Reminiscence, it is confirmed that Kaito hooks up with Reika. So
Yeah, but
look, we don't talk about that game. However,
we don't talk
it
about
is-
that game.
it is true that in Reminiscence, it is confirmed that Kaito and Reika have a thing. You know, which means that the true ending of Reika in Game 3 is canon.
Yeah, but let's not talk about that. I don't want to relive the horrors of finding out how that panned out.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, it's just to put it on short. Reminiscence is a flawed game, a very flawed game. However, the journey of that game is super cool and interesting. It's just that again, Kinugasa, he likes to exploit human misery a little too much, and he overuses the theme of rape to a degree that I do not like. And he does it a lot in Reminiscence, especially with the clear favorite of that game, which is Aki. Aki is the sister of the protagonist, and she's the one of the loli inserts of the many. Well, okay, she's not even loli; she's just petite, but the loli cons like
Body
her
type.
for some fucking reason.
Yeah, well, it's the body type B. You don't
Yeah.
need to dance around it. It's the body type.
Yeah, she's just petite, and yeah, he uses the rape meme with her, and it's something alright. It's a development.
That's one way to put it, I guess.
Yeah, Akatsuki 3 is more or less a similar context where once you get to know what happens to Kaito's parents and the full story is just like it's just one misery after another, and it's just at some point you just end up getting tired of.
Unfucking fortunately, it is. I would argue too that you're going to see how rape is very overused in Anzu's route too when you have the opportunity to read that when Game 2 comes out, because oh boy, you're in for a problem. You'll see. That's all I'll say is you'll see. I don't want to spoil it, but you'll see.
Well then, I'm gonna ask you a couple more questions, and then we can dip because we've been already an hour. By the way,
Fuck it. People will listen to the whole VOD. I don't care. We can go for another hour if you want. It doesn't bother me.
I mean, sure. Whatever floats our boat, man. In the end. Okay, so EOPs versus GOPs. The eternal battle of the ages. Do you think the mere existence of these terms is retarded, or is there a meaning behind them? Or should we use them?
Okay, here's my take on that. The terms themselves are not a problem. It is the connotation that the terms have developed. And what I mean by that is that the JOP connotation has a lot of undertones of elitism behind it, because it's kind of like the best way I can compare it for people who don't really understand these terms. So for people who don't understand what these abbreviations mean, EOP is English only person and JOP is Japanese only person.
Well, P can be plebeian or whatever.
Yeah, it's how you right. It's how you consume visual novels. And here's the thing: the JOP term has kind of like a lot of elitism behind it, because it's kind of like the best comparison I can make for people who don't really understand these terms is like the manga versus the anime enjoyer, right? So like the manga person's like, oh, I've already read all that because it's already been released in the manga and it makes a lot more sense in the manga. And the people who read the anime, read the anime, boy, I'm having a roll today. The people who watch anime are kind of viewed as mouth breathers, because they're like, oh, this is all I know about this series, and it's a very silly way to kind of knock someone for how they enjoy their media. People are going to consume media the way they want to consume media. You don't need to browbeat someone for the way they want to do it. You do it how you want to do it. Don't feel like you need to cave to someone's pressure. And I feel like that connotation of just elitism and the undercurrent of I'm better than you because I do this is not really something that's really needed in the scene, but it's something that's going to exist because that's just how people are. In regards to how I feel about those terms, though, I do believe that in terms of maximizing your enjoyment of visual novels, you are better off learning Japanese, simply because of the fact that, number one, you have a lot more content that's available to you, and number two, you don't have to rely on localizers to sort of spoon feed you the methods of enjoying the media in a way that they conceive as, the way it should be enjoyed. You get to choose that for yourself. So ultimately, you have a lot more autonomy in how you enjoy and consume your media. So, do I recommend learning Japanese? Yes. But do you have to learn Japanese to enjoy visual novels? No. Ultimately, you will get a better experience learning Japanese because that's just how, you're going to get a much more direct connection to the source material, but is it necessary? No. I think, especially going forward with, unfortunately, AI translation is going to put everyone out of a job eventually, just how it is. That barrier will be broken down with technology. But we're not there yet. We're at least 20, 30 years away from the AI revolution, I think.
God, I sure hope so. I wouldn't like my job being taken from me, Jesus.
It's not going to be taken from you. And again, there's always going to be people who prefer human translated work anyway, just simply because of the fact that it has a lot more personality behind it. Like if we were to say run Akatsuki through ChatGPT, you'd get an accurate translation, but you wouldn't really understand a lot of the funny behind it. Because again, Akatsuki is one of those games too, where some characters just love to screw around with kanji puns, and the puns will be translated in a way that's ultimately very unsatisfying. They'll be translated correctly, but they won't be translated in a way that's funny.
Well, it's not exclusively the humor. I would say it's also about... It's like, if you run Magicoi through a machine, sure, it comes out like exact as it should be. More or less. Let's put it more or less. However, the personality is not there, right? What makes the character special, it's not there anymore. And it's pretty much the same with this game,
I don't think we would be...
personalities.
Kaito would be a lot more sanitized if we adhered strictly to the exact way it was written in Japanese. Could we do it? Sure. But it really wouldn't be... Number one, it wouldn't be as fun for us because we have a lot of fun writing these jokes. And number two, Kaito would not have as much of a personality as he does. And he wouldn't be, just the absolute chaotic ball of energy that we know him to be. The thing that people sort of had a criticism of when they first read Akatsuki, the original iteration, before I, went and cleaned it up, is that Kaito typically is a lot more of an ore character, which is like a more tough kind of, rough kind of, personality, rough around the edges, so to speak. And he mellows out over time. And you don't really see that transition, I would argue, until later on in Shimatsuron and the, Safe Route endings. And also, you don't really see that as you get to see that a lot more in the after stories as well. So there's definitely a very clear, stark transition between Ore Kaito and more sort of like normal Kaito, I guess you could say. And that is something I'd argue that a machine would not be able to capture, simply because of the fact that that personality shift is marked by not really different words, but the way the words are used and the situations that the words end up in and end up being used. So you ultimately can't really say that, like, this character is, this way, because you're not going to understand that if you just run it through a machine. You're gonna lose the personality of it, and I think that is problematic. So human translations are always gonna have a place in the medium. It's just a matter of how long it takes AI to kind of figure that out. We don't know, but I think we have a long future ahead of us before that's really gonna happen.
Well, Blue says that visual localization has changed quite a bit since 2010. And
oh, certainly has. No question about it. I mean, you had people thinking machine translation was acceptable in 2010. Chushingoda being one of those perfect examples. And I would argue even back in 2010, not as much was being localized. Although a lot of the greats weren't localized at that time either. Stuff has come out since then. Perfect example of that would be like stuff like Higurashi now has a much better translation. Da Capo, one of the, what's considered like one of the protogenitors of Gal games, is, a perfect example. Various other crazy stories, House and Fata Morgana, stuff that we consider like to be the cornerstone of visual novels today, weren't localized. And there was a big fever around getting that stuff out and getting that to the masses, because not only was there were a lot of money to be made by doing so, because people would love to buy this stuff, and two, you also had a lot of stories that were very interesting to be told. I think, honestly, the reason that there is such a big scene in the English market for visual novels is because they are capable of telling stories in a way that you can't get through any other Japanese media. Manga doesn't tell stories as well as visual novels do, because you're limited by the amount of characters and pages that you can produce. Anime is limited by time constraints. Ultimately, the most complete stories are told by the visual novel.
Visual novels are limited by budget as well.
Well, yes, of course, there's a limiter of budget, but again, when you sort of... I wouldn't say when you remove the strict restrictions of budget, but you can definitely get a passion project that is definitely more blood, sweat, and tears than, certain other places. Like, look at Schwartz's Market. That game has a easily $1 million budget between everything that is, packaged in there, between the voices, between the amazing visual interactions, between the little just creature comforts of the engine. For some reason, they just said surround sound is cool, so let's toss that in there. Like, again, there's so much built in there that's just incredible to kind of behold as a completed unit. I mean, look at Ginyu no Haruka. That is a easily $1 million budget VN between, again, all of the voices, because that game is long as hell. How much it costs to write it, how much it costs to program it all into the Sigilus engine. God help whoever had to do that. The movie production that's in there, animating the opening, just so many different things that go into making that game as unique as it is. Easily, it's very expensive, but God, did they make it back, because that game sold really well in Japan. Not so much, not so much in the English market because it never got released, but Toneworks games are very popular in Japan for a very good reason.
You would be surprised, the best-selling Toneworks game is actually Tsukikana.
That's not surprising to me. That's not at all surprising to me. I'm not surprised, because I'm not. I understand why that would be a very popular game in Japan, but not so much here. Tsukikana is kind of the first game to really depart from the typical Toneworks formula, where they kind of include some supernatural mumbo-jumbo going on, and yeah, I'm kind of not surprised. That is a very popular topic in Japan, because it's far from the ordinary. It's something that sort of allows that little escapism that people in Japanese society so desperately crave. And I can't really blame them, from what I know of Japanese culture.
No more school settings, Japan. When will you learn? It's all so tiresome.
It is, but oh well. It's fun in the end.
Yeah, no, God, I remember I joined this community. When was it? It had to be 2016, something of the sort. 2016. Let's say 2016. And God, out of 10 fan translations, 8 would go to the shitter back then. Oh, it was glorious.
I mean, how many? Like, a perfect example of that. Okay, is how many translation projects started up for Kimi no Zo over IRC of all things back in the day? I mean, good lord. Yeah, Kimi no Zo had a lot of translation attempts, actually. There were 3 that I can think of back in the day, as early as 2003, that started up. And it was ultimately just people exchanging text files over IRC. That's how they did it back then.
That's kind of difficult.
And Skype. People used Skype to coordinate.
Yeah.
That's a shocker.
I used to use Skype.
Yeah. It's just the sign of the times. That's just how you used to have to do it.
Well, I mean, the thing that has changed most than anything is that we're not teenagers anymore, so that's true. It's easier to commit. That's why projects nowadays, most of the times I'm gonna say, they succeed, because people that are over 20 years old commit to them, right? Instead of let's say 16 to 20-year-old randoms who are still in the middle of their college studies and, hey guys, I'm gonna disappear for 6 months, but trust me, the project's not dead. Spoiler alert, it's dead. But
yeah,
unless a miracle happens.
That did happen a lot back in the day, and it still happens now, but it's not as often. You have a lot more people who are definitely a lot more committed to seeing things through. We, for one, are very committed to seeing things through, and unless something catastrophic happens where one of us dies, we're going to finish Shimatsu Own, no questions asked.
I mean, no offense to Southeastern Asians, but they are the ones who normally now create projects and fail. They are. I don't know what's the reason behind them wanting to release things in English now. I have no clue, but I've seen a lot of Southeastern Asians trying to start projects, and most, if not, no, I'm not gonna say all because it's false. I know a couple of translators that are still going and are Southeastern Asian, but most of them horribly fail in one way or another. And it's because in most cases they are teenagers or late teens, early 20s that don't know how these things work. And it is
Yeah.
what it is.
The reason too is that they're going for English is obviously because English is the most mass appeal, so you're going to get the most reputation for it if you do
The
it in English.
e-fame points. I mean,
Well, yeah.
I
I mean, if you
understand it.
translate a game in Indonesian, you're ultimately limiting the amount of people who are going to experience it because Indonesian is not a widely spoken language.
Oh, you'd be surprised. Almost 30% of the people who download our stuff are Indonesians. So.
Oh no, I'm not saying that the medium isn't popular over there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that in order to get mass appeal in a broader community that's multilingual, English is going to be the way to go. That's
Yeah.
the way that you're going to get the most
Plus,
recognition.
Indonesian people prefer English by default. This is something that I've asked them multiple times, and most of the times, indeed, they just prefer English instead of their own language, which is understandable. I prefer English to Spanish myself, so it's a matter of choice. In the end.
And yet Sakura no Uta has a Spanish translation and not an English one.
I mean, there's a reason it has a translation in a language. I mean, and even the Spanish one gets bashed on a constant basis. I haven't read it. I don't care. I will not read it.
Yeah,
But,
it's very hard to accurately translate Skaji's schizo ramblings into any language.
it's not as hard as you think it is. It's just made to be hard by people who masturbate mentally with Skaji's writing, like Gams and Mugi. Like Gams and Mugi are like the best example. And sure, I would not be able to translate something like Subahibi. Personally, I think I wouldn't be able to. But it's not really that hard to understand as they claim it is. It is hard to translate though. That much is true.
But yeah, I mean, it's just a mess. Honestly, the problem with Skaji is just that you have to be really kind of get in the mindset of the author and understand how like his schizo ramblings work, and also just the flowery language he uses. I would argue purple prose in a lot of cases is just very difficult to really properly translate into English. It's one of those cases where it's capturing the intent of the author. Although we're also talking about a guy who publicly posted on Twitter that fucking a chicken should be absolutely legal. So I don't know how much that means to you all, but
well, leaving the chicken memes aside, there's just certain games that will never see the light of day in English. At least until someone who either doesn't care about repercussions online or someone who's clueless comes in and does it. But there's just certain games you cannot touch. It's the issue with this dogshit community where there are things that are how do we call them? They're gated, right? It's gated behind elitists. So light games, for example, any game from that company, just like no go. If you're a translator, avoid light games at all costs. If you can.
Oh yes, no, those are
Makura. Avoid Makura at all costs. If
Albatross.
You can. Well, Albatross is just like it's such a small amount of people who would complain that I wouldn't even. Nobody would like to translate that because Albatross is an actual novel instead of a visual novel. So I don't know. And plus, the writer actually knows how to write for change, which is a rarity. But I don't know.
You can write an ending at least, but those games are insanely hard to read just from a Japanese perspective.
Oretsuba, Makura Light, and KKK, basically. But
well, honestly,
KKK
most
cannot
novel
be translated.
Games. KKK cannot. Even from a technical perspective, the text is displayed vertically, like an ancient, Japanese scroll kind of thing. So that's a challenge in it itself.
Even if they found a solution to that game cannot be translated. Period.
Oh, there are solutions. They're just not good ones. Because again, by doing that, you're already losing some of the character. So why bother?
I mean, you lose character by translating Japanese characters into English. So
I mean, I guess, but you lose a lot of it's part of the presentation too. Like part of KKK's sort of mysticism is that it's ancient Japanese, So you by displaying it in a way that ancient Japanese would have been displayed, you're being sort of authentic to the presentation. But in just making it look, horizontal text, it's not as special. But I digress.
Well, the TLDR is that there are games like that's actually an issue I've seen with translators recently where they're just clueless about what to choose, and what should what you should be able to choose based on what companies control what and not.
Hot take. Localization is subjective. Because ultimately, there is never going to be one set of standards where you should absolutely do something to localize. I'd argue there are certain decisions that are more popular than others. The honorifics debate is something that's ongoing. We personally do not believe that honorifics should be used, but other people see reason to do so. So again, it ultimately comes down to personal preferences, and localization is absolutely subjective in that regard.
Yeah, no, what I meant is that fan translators nowadays do not know how to choose their games because they easily get taken down by licensing.
Yes. And that's another thing too. You have to really be very careful what you pick for a project. If I had to recommend things that people would pick, if you want to get into fan translation, you know Japanese, you're N2 or N1, and you want to go out there and do a translation project. First thing you need is staff, without question. You need someone who is very good at, decompiling and recompiling these games from a technical perspective. You're going to need someone like that.
You're already asking too much, but go ahead.
No. Let me finish. You have to do that. You have to find a competent editor who understands at least some Japanese and can understand, English on a very, very high level, if that's your target language. And then you need competent QA people who can properly proofread and sort of catch any fuck-ups that your editor makes. Because Lord knows I make enough that if we didn't have competent QA people, there'd be a lot more problems with our games than we actually already have. So you definitely need to do those things. And on top of all of that, if you really are not confident in your translation, a good TLC would also be something that some people, I believe, would benefit from. But again, once you've found your staff, you then need to ultimately agree on a project to take. Stay away from anything released in the past 5 years. That just kind of goes without saying. You can't really translate anything because those games are ultimately going to be sort of targeted by companies. A great example of that is the Hokaku no Cinderella translation, where doomed to fail from the start because it's too new, and ultimately someone picked it up. And you're never going to win against a company. You're going to always have to be the one who picks it up first. So you're going to want to go into the backlog. You're going to want to pick an older game. Ultimately, older games have easier ways of, managing their engines because there's not as complex anyway, so you're just better off in general. Personally, if I were to pick a project, and this is something I do want to do in the future, if I ever, manage to spend enough time and learn Japanese properly, I would argue Da Capo. And the reason for that is because, number one, Circus has no interest in releasing any more of the games stateside. They've done Da Capo 1, 2, 3, and Del Segno, and that was enough for them. They also released Kotori Love EXP, which is a collection of Kotori's fan discs, or Kotori's stories from across various fan discs. But there are various other stories to sort of pick up on that are in that sort of frame that are easy pickings. I would argue even a lot of the older fan discs for Da Capo that were released as part of the Sakura collection are very worth translating. And even if there's some overlap with Kotori EXP, it's not ultimately something I think that would be jarring, so to speak. And they're worth it. So with regards to that, I would definitely like to do all of the remaining fan discs for Da Capo 1, 2, and 3, or at least most of them, because there's just some that aren't worth it. And then would definitely love to do Da Capo 4 and 5 someday. But after I do that, who knows? But eventually, if you ever find out there's a Da Capo translation coming out, it might be me. But I can't say for sure. Now that I've announced it, someone's probably going to pick it up. That'd be my luck.
Well, allow me to correct you, Kobra, because you seem to be working under a wrong assumption, which is that projects start after staff is gathered, and that's...
Well, no, that's true. I understand that's not how most projects go.
Oh, no.
Ultimately, you find staff along the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No project has started like that. The only projects that start like that are with already established teams. Normally what happens is that the translator starts alone, and then on the way, the people who become core components of the team join. And nowadays I would say it's not impossible to find people willing to work with you as on, let's say roles beyond QA, because QA I'm not gonna say it's a low effort job, because it's not. However, it requires an immense amount of way less effort than an editor would do, for example.
I think the phrase you're looking for is it's a lower barrier to entry, and I'd agree. it's a lot lower barrier to entry to be a QA person than it is any of the other roles.
Yeah.
And because ultimately all you need to do is you need to look over the text and make sure there's no obvious fuck-ups. Or you need to understand, where something is done wrong and fix it.
Mm-hmm.
It's playtesting, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I understand I'm oversimplifying it, but that's really what it is at its core. And realistically speaking, if you want to just get involved in a visual novel translation group and you are friendly with someone who is translating a game, QA is you're in. That's how I started this team. And ultimately I became editor because our current editor didn't have enough time to finish his job. So I stepped in, and I'd argue I'm a lot faster, even though latest efforts have not really proved that, but I digress.
Well, it's not about being fast, it's about doing things right.
Yeah, it's about. You also don't want to take a million years to edit something too. Like, I don't want to be that guy who's, oh hey, guys, it's still an edit, but the progress ticker hasn't moved in like 5 years. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be someone who's, very transparent with the community about how we do things, which I believe I've very much been. And I've also been very transparent with how we've done Akatsuki too. For example, we have a progress tracker that's out there, and that's what's referenced on a lot of the. If anybody really scours our visual novels, the translation threads every day, or every week, I should say. Those numbers are from my progress tracker that I maintain. So, those numbers are not bullshit; they're real. Although I think I'm going to do the tracker for Akatsuki 3 a little differently, simply because the way some of those numbers are represented is a little disingenuous. But I digress. You'll see what happens when I do that. I have to do that at some point, though. Ugh. Not looking forward to it. It's a lot of work.
Fun translation. My friend became one of staff. Congratulations. I don't know who your friend is, but very happy. Always good to go official. It's a pain in the ass because you work on the rules at that point, but
yeah,
at
you
least
have a lot more
paid,
rules,
right, guys?
I mean, sure, getting paid is nice, but again, I'm not really I don't really need personally, like if I was going to do something, I don't really care about the clout. I don't care if you don't like my translation. I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it for you.
I actually care quite a bit. So.
Well, yeah, you do, but I'm saying for me personally. Like if I was going to do Da Capo, I really wouldn't give a shit what anybody thinks. I'm going to do it. If you don't like it, okay. I'll listen to criticism, but I'm not necessarily going to change things for how you want me
I'll
to do
criticize
them.
every single line, Kobra. Don't you worry.
You go right ahead, B. Just be aware that you're going to get hit with a who asked quite often.
What do you mean, Kobra? I'm gonna train you to be the best translator.
No, you're gonna get hit with who. You're gonna get hit with who asked is what you're gonna get hit with if you go like, "Oh, I hate how you did this." Okay, who asked?
I did. I'll be the one asking the question.
Yeah.
And you'll be the one answering them before a jury, dude.
Yeah. Go ahead and put me in front of your funny tribunal. Well, you'll never be my real mom.
Going back on the conversation I had before, what I wanted to reach, like the ultimate point I wanted to reach, is that I think Kobra speaks from a very privileged perspective because this is the first group you've been in, right?
Yeah. I have to say this has been a lot more. Yeah, this has been a very functional group where we have a very clear methodology on how we do things, when we do things, and we are very organized.
I mean, we are
most
in
of the time it is an
unbridled
clusterfuck.
Yeah. we are in a very privileged position where the team gets along well. We have roles for pretty much everything. When I say everything, it's like we don't lack anything at all, and most of us work at a relatively decent pace, enough to make yearly releases. So that's pretty, and without being paid as well, which is pretty insane, right?
We don't get any money from doing this, by the way. That's another thing that's really important. If you're gonna do a fan translation, you're not doing it for money. You're doing it for the love of the work, because that's really ultimately why we're here. I fell in love with Akatsuki the minute I started reading the translation of it, and I would not change a goddamn thing about how I ended up in here, honestly.
High level N1 Japanese skills, you can do it. I already work for companies, don't you worry, friend. I just don't work for visual novel ones because circumstances that I will not elaborate on, but let's say I don't get along with many companies and many people within the scene. But that's fine. It's the fate I chose and I abide by it. But no. If I wanted to sell my works theoretically, I know I could. It's totally sellable. It's just that I don't because it's a pain in the ass. Imagine having to wait 4 years or more to have your translation be released, aka this Sekai project time lapse, or even well, I call it Sekai project time lapse, but it's a just Sekai project and manga gamer time lapse in general.
No, I'd argue Sekai's the worst. I'm still waiting for Harvest Festa, you jackasses.
I mean, didn't a fan translation come out recently of that?
Yeah, the fact that there was a fan translation project that was able to start and almost finish the game in the time span between when Sekai released Rewrite Plus and when they said they would release Harvest Festa is kind of disappointing.
Yes.
I mean, I know there were a lot of circumstances that are surrounding that translation project, so I'm not going to shit on it too much, but good lord, guys, you really could have done a better job with how you managed that. If you were actually committed to getting that out, you would have got it out a lot faster, but hey, priorities. Let's finish the first volume of Nekonyan 500 times again before we actually put out the goddamn, Harvest Festa. The thing that people want or that paid for a Kickstarter backer.
Nekopara, right? No, Nekonian.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Nekopara. I'm sorry. My rage blinded my speech functions there for a little bit.
Well, there you have it, guys. Dealing with personally, I feel like dealing with localization companies is very difficult, especially. And it's gonna sound wrong, but I'm gonna say it anyways. Especially if you want your work to be respected and not changed, which is something that is asked out of us quite a bit. I remember when I was approached by Akabe, they wanted all mentions of profanity, and I mean every single mention of profanity you can imagine out of the game. So, for example, you cannot say that something is a pain in the ass because it has ass, so you cannot say that. You cannot say butt because it implies ass, for example.
You have to. You're working under a leash, and it's not fun.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I wouldn't say the humor that we have from it comes from the swears, but we are definitely able to bend things a little bit. Yeah, we were able to bend things a little bit with how it's represented, and it also would make Kaito sound a lot more muted. So ultimately, it would not be the same project that you know and love. I really believe it would be a lot better. To have, be able to use profanity, because God, there are just some times where I think even if you read Thai over, once we, release the rework, you're going to understand how goddamn frustrated that character makes me sometimes, and I let it out a little bit in my writing. I'm not going to say I don't. Some of it might have been ironed out by QA, but, most of it probably got through.
Well, Jesus, you went on a rant there, Kobra.
You knew this was going to happen the moment you invited me in here.
Oh no, I'm happy to see it. It's something that brings joy. Something that brings me joy. It's something that we started to do ever since we met, right? I don't know when you started joining calls either, but it wasn't long after you joined the team, right?
I probably waited about a month, and that was only because it really we were required to be. The first project we actually really worked on in earnest from start to finish together was One-chan no Yuwaku. If anybody remembers that.
Not again. God,
yeah, that was a
look, what matters is that we
project.
Finished. Yeah, what matters is that we finished, right? So who cares?
I'm just glad that was our first game and not Akatsuki, because what? I feel like Akatsuki. Well, yeah, because I feel like we learned a lot from One-chan, and we did right what we did wrong, and we were able to not do that in Akatsuki, and ultimately we were able to revisit Akatsuki and actually fix it the way it deserved to be fixed. Like, I'm going through, things with Mint today, actually, and I'm just like, wow, that was a dumb decision. I'm gonna fix that, and I'll fix a couple lines here and there, and. That reminds me, by the way, strong reason to reread Akatsuki if you already read it is because I would argue there are at least 5,000 lines throughout the game that have been changed, if not way more.
I'd say more.
They're probably more.
For sure.
Yeah, there were so many changes between
at least a quarter,
the original.
At least a third of the lines have been changed, so I would say 12,000.
Yeah, that's probably about right. I didn't want to overestimate, but yeah, that's honestly probably about right. So yeah, if you haven't read it, reread it. I think a lot of the stupid things were gone that we made that were probably just not good decisions. And again, the problem with that game that I found when I was working on it was that it was a situation where we had too many cooks, and that's another thing that you want to avoid if you ever get into a translation project. We had at any given time, well, at different times I should say, 5 different people work on editing. A litany of different people working on QA. There were TLCs at one point that did, different things. And ultimately, it became a situation where many different voices were part of that project, and it was weighed down by that. It was very inconsistent throughout the whole game. Some routes were better than others, some routes were more lackluster than others, and some things just didn't work. So ultimately, we went through and standardized everything to that specific set of standards that we ultimately fixed, I believe, in most cases. Again, I spent 6 goddamn months fixing this thing, so that should tell you. Yeah, ultimately we got a better product out of it in the end. And I ultimately got a better understanding of how the game works. So win-win in that regard. And I think it honestly better prepared me for how to work on Akatsuki 2, because at that point when I'd written for these characters so much that I understand how things are supposed to be said, speech patterns and stuff like that. Like, there's actually very interesting example of speech patterns is actually in Reika's after story. I'll talk about this because it's not really a spoiler. Kyoka, in sort of Kyoka / Reika's after story, spoiler, Kyoka hijacks Reika's after story. It's a funny. Anyway, she has like, she speaks, well, as Kaito says it, like she's a stick up her ass. And ultimately, she can speak normally. She just has said, oh, well, my parents don't really want me to. And you have to really kind of understand when she's speaking Keigo and when she's not. And,
for
that
those who don't know,
ultimately means you have to word things.
Keigo is polite Japanese, for those who don't know.
Oh yeah, I probably should have explained that. Yes, Keigo is like very polite Japanese that you would use in like a workplace. So you know, there's like 3 different languages within Japanese that are kind of all their own thing. But I digress. The point is
don't explain them because we would be here all day. Honestly.
Oh God, would we? Yeah, we could do a whole separate video on that, but we won't. Anyway, the point is that you have to understand when she's speaking Keigo and when she's not, and that ultimately means she's saying things in a different way. So, you know, it ultimately boils down to how you are able to kind of just, you know, manipulate the way a character is saying something. Like, you can talk in a lot more relaxed manner when she's speaking normally, but you have to talk in a very stiff, posh, you know, upper crust kind of way when, you know, when she's using Keigo. Which ultimately can be funny. It can produce very interesting results, but, you know, you'll see what I mean when you read the game. I think there's a lot to be said for her speech mannerisms and how that plays into her plot overall.
Which is, you know, it's just filler in the end.
Yeah, sure,
separate routes. But
sure, it's filler, but honestly, I'm not mad that Kyoka got her own route. I think ultimately that route is pretty good in terms of content. It's actually the longest after story in the whole game, and with good reason. It's a very satisfying read, but you know, is what it is. You'll ultimately see when you read it, and I think you'll ultimately enjoy it.
Well, I was actually going to ask you at some point, what would you like to translate if you were, you know, N1 or whatever, you know, master of Japanese translation?
Well, I've already touched on Da Capo.
Yeah. But what if you could do anything? Like,
if I could do anything,
yeah.
Okay, I would definitely do Anakoji, which is...
What?
I'll explain what it is. Yes.
Oh
And the reason is, my Finnish silver-haired waifu. Do not take it from me.
There is no way you're being serious right now.
I am being 100 goddamn % serious.
That game is so mid.
But the Finnish silver-haired waifu be.
But it's so mid, Kobra.
But it's good. I know. Okay. For those who don't know, because I'm sure no one knows, there is a Minato Carnival game, same guys that made Sujido, not Majikoi. Even though they're the same company, it's just a different subdivision. The game is called Anakoji Naoko Dokinido no Shinigami, and basically it is, you know, it's known as Anigin in Japanese, but like, that game basically is written by O. Jackson, who is also the guy who wrote Tsuriyotsu and the guy who wrote Oretsuba. It's not as hard to translate as those because it's a comedy more than it is, you know, more than like a serious story. But Anakoji has a lot of sort of the Minato soft charm with a lot of O. Jackson's writing. And I truly think it would be a very fun game to read, to understand, and it's ultimately not also disgustingly long like, say, you know, Majikoi is. So it's something that could be easily done that wouldn't, you know, make you want to just jump off a bridge. It would be a good project, I think, to start with. And, you know, besides maybe like a fan disc if you were going to do that. I've already spoken about Da Capo at length, so I won't talk about that. There is a very, very, very unknown game also that I would like to do at some point called Sin Client. It's kind of a meme in our server, but it's basically a game by a very unknown company called Boost 5, which basically is a very plot-centric game that revolves around a character losing his memories, and he's ultimately, chased by people in black suits who, clues him into the fact that he wasn't a normal person. And there's a big mystery that sort of plays out around it that is ultimately, I believe, worth reading, and would be something I'd like to bring to the West, because it's a very cool game, it's a very interesting story, and I think it would be worth doing. And again, it's not a super long game either, so it's not something that's going to make you, want to hurt yourself while doing it. So there's that. But yeah, those are the things that come to mind on the top of my head. I certainly think there are other projects that are definitely worth doing, but have not been done yet. But a lot of them are older games. Say Shoujo Sentai Lakers 3 is one that comes to mind as well, but that's going to get done eventually. For those who don't know, that is a very old PC 98 game, which has already the first 2 games have been translated. It's known as Holy Girl Force Lakers in English, but I think Say Shoujo Sentai is a little bit more of a charming way of saying it.
I can't believe you want to do an Ekoji.
I do because I know you're not gonna do it, and then after that, someone can actually put out Minato Carnival.
But you can translate Minato Carnival without doing an Ekoji first.
I don't think you should. I really think you should do. Well, not you specifically, but I think if someone's going to do it, they should absolutely do. Obviously Virgin Road first, but who knows if we'll ever get that done. And also Anakoji, just simply because the game is very charming. It's a funny game to look at. Yes, there's an idle component to it. Yes, that annoys the shit out of most people, but god damn it, my Finnish silver-haired military waifu is calling for me, and I want it badly.
Yeah, someone's down bad.
I am down bad, and I'm not goddamn ashamed of it.
Sure, Kobra. Once you learn Japanese, read it and realize how mid it is, then you'll be back.
I'll still do it.
I'll tell you I told you so,
My honor as a man is staked on it, B. I will do it.
So,
but
if you were to do the first game of a trilogy, would you feel compelled to do the 3 games just because?
Yes, I would. As a matter of fact, yes, I would. And as a matter of fact, I would be compelled to do any fan discs or side material that sprung off of it.
Even if it takes multiple years.
Yes, even if it takes multiple years. I don't care. The point is, B, that, companies aren't going to do that because it's a matter of resource and, time and money to them. Because, yeah, of course it is. It costs money to do this stuff. It's not free. It's why they charge for this stuff. But, again, at the end of the day, the fans are able to do things in a way that companies do not have to worry about. They're able to, sort of be a little more free with how they express themselves in their translations. Their public-facing manners can be a lot more free and, loosey-goosey. I mean, Christ, look at how Minato Magi TL operates. They operate like a bunch of shit posters, and it's fantastic. And I think a lot of people really enjoy that humor. Look at how we operate in our announcements. We act like a bunch of shit posters, and we kind of are.
The 2 examples you post are exceptions to the rule. Massive exceptions to the rule.
Fair enough. But again, I feel like if you operate like a business, you ultimately become a business. And I enjoy the fact that being a fan translator gives me the freedom to kind of just, do exactly what I want. And it's a lot more satisfying that way. But yeah, back on the subject of Minato Carnival FD. The game is insane, and I think it really should be localized, especially because Sujido has been localized, and everybody really, really likes Sujido. I mean, there's always conversations about it wherever I look in a visual novel space, because it's just that well respected. And, had a fantastic fan translation, would have never come out otherwise. Virgin Road, someday, someone will do. Anakoji, someday, maybe me, someone will do. And then there'd be no reason not to do Minato Carnival. And that game is batshit fucking insane.
Carnival
it absolutely deserves a translation.
You're not gonna like what I'm gonna say, but Carnival overall is mid.
No. B, there's people with stands fighting each other. How do you...
no.
It's mid.
I will not have this argument, Kobra. The Sujido story of Carnival is dog shit, and you know it.
Okay, the Sujido story is meh. But like...
It's bad. It's bad.
It's meh. It's not bad. No, it's not.
Terrible.
It's not bad.
It's just an excuse to add another heroine to jerk off to. It's disgusting.
Hey. No. The storytelling is fine.
No.
I understand how you feel about the heroine. You have a point, but
I mean, she's
the
hot,
storytelling's pretty
but
cool.
there's no point to the story. Like, there's only one character that has a stand, and the stands don't even fight against each other. Like that's how bad
but
it
it's
is.
just. I'm not saying it's only worth it because of the stands. It's worth it because there's a lot of content in there that's just funny. It's, I believe it is kind of the epitome of what Minato Soft represents, which is chaotic, insane, well-written stories that are ultimately very satisfying to work with. And I believe it's a story that should be told.
Well,
someday it will be.
I don't agree, but okay. We'll learn.
Yeah,
we'll
you're entitled to your opinion. Oh, before I forget, also, the people who wrote Chushingura, I would love to do some of their other works as well, because they have a very extensive back catalog that ultimately nobody really knows about. So the company that wrote Chushingura is called Inrei, and they have a long catalog of lots of not only fan discs for Chushingura, but they also have a new story that came out called Genpei Ryuron Nemaki, which is another sort of story that is extremely long, but talks about, its focus is kind of on like the late Heian period as opposed to, the story of the 48 Ronin, or 47 Ronin, but, anyway, it focuses a lot more on that sort of era, which is, set like, Heian is like, I don't know, it's like 850, I think it's like 1400s, right? Heian period?
I have no clue, honestly.
We'll say, I think it's like 800 something years ago is about right. So yeah, we'll operate on that assumption. Long time ago. Point being that very interesting story. Yes, there's a lot of info dumping, but something I would like to do. But I need a lot more sort of muscle as a translator before I even attempt something like that, because it's got a lot of funny ancient Japanese that would just cause you to suffer.
Oh yeah, no. That requires like the games you are describing, such as the ones you just set up that company specifically, plus the ones from Bason, for example.
Yeah, Bason is another
Shinko
company
Hime.
I'd like to tackle if I ever get the
Shinko Hime games require a very big brain.
Yeah, you require a big brain because of the historical references as well as the complexity of the language at the time.
I mean, it's mainly because they merged Sengoku Jidai from China and Japan, so it's difficult to keep up, especially with so many characters.
Not only that, just the massive amounts of characters that you have to keep track of with their personalities and everything. On top of the fact that SRPGs are kind of not really a thing here in the West, besides maybe Fire Emblem is really the only one.
Let's go Fire Emblem.
Fire Emblem, yes, is very good, but it's the only SRPG that's really met any sort of marked success here in the West, besides maybe Advance Wars. I'd say Advance Wars is maybe another one, but wasn't as popular. Anyway, point being that when you talk about those games, you definitely need a very, very good handle on Japanese in order to really understand how to properly do it. Which goes back to our whole argument about, we want to, obviously preserve the language than the author's intention as much as possible, but you might not be able to in certain situations, so you have to make compromises. But games like Da Capo, for example, are so much easier. Da Capo is a much easier franchise to really localize because it's moege, and ultimately not very complicated. So, realistically, if you understand how Da Capo works, you can just kind of go through a lot of the other fan discs that are out there. Like, I think Innocent Finale never got a translation, which is... Oh no, Innocent Finale did get a translation. I'm thinking of the iPhone games, never mind. Let's see, what else didn't get... Oh, Seasons and Onsen Hen didn't get a translation. Christmas Days never got a translation because that has a bunch of circus games in there. And there's also just a metric fuck ton of Da Capo 2 fan discs also that never saw translations that absolutely should. Obviously their Christmas disc, but also Spring Celebration never saw a translation. No fucking idea why that didn't happen, because it's literally just a bunch of extra stories that are really cool. Fall in Love was another one that didn't get a translation. Side Episodes to You was another one. There's a million of them. Point is, a lot of content out there that just Manga Gamer probably didn't have the budget to localize. So, anything really in the Sakura edition, I would say, is probably fair game. And probably mostly because, it's easy to find, because without the Sakura edition, it wouldn't be. But, again, lots of content, lots of stuff that's easy pickings for, if you want to be a fan translator. Don't let me stop you. But, again... I would argue that's where you should start. Moege is very easy to translate. It's not complicated. You're not going to want to hurt yourself with all the funny Japanese references. So, start there if you really want to get into the translation scene.
My rec is to just start with whatever you like, as long as it's not kamige, and go through the motions, basically.
As long as it's not something that's like really hard to do, like obviously the untranslatable kamige, like say the
untranslatable kamige.
Yeah. Well, no, that's what it is. I mean, Sakura no Uta, Sakura no Toki, Kajiri Kamui Kagura. Stuff that.
Sakura is completely translatable.
Okay, it's translatable, sure. But you'll get your door beaten down, so don't.
No, I would never consider that still.
Yeah. KKK, obviously, anything but light, really. Just don't hurt yourself, man.
Oh yeah, like you'll be subject to internet harassment, so I'd rather just If I was a translator, I would just avoid those games altogether.
I mean, if you know Japanese and you want to read them, go for it. But if you want to not suffer, don't translate them.
Yeah, exactly.
They're very good though. They're very good if you want to read them.
I mean, there's a reason why there's a group of people who obsess over them on a daily basis. So.
I mean, there's also the fact that Dies Irae is literally just fucking wearaboo fan translations.
You say that, but Dies Irae is definitely the weakest, or one of the weakest light games out there. Like,
really?
Even Paradise Lost, I would consider Paradise Lost somewhat better. Like it's that insane.
Oh, Paradise Lost is kind of related to. It's the same series as I guess. If that would be.
All light games are connected. It's part of like a universe. It's like KKK is part of the. It's in the same. It's related to Dice Irae. It's all part of like a big universe and story.
Well, yeah, it's the same setting. That's.
Just that
it takes place in the same world.
It's so much autism. I just cannot keep up. It needs like at least multiple translators who know their shit, and they need to understand Lightverse, which is very difficult to do. I cannot understand Lightverse personally. I have no clue. So
it is a very difficult series of games to translate, just because of how insane a lot of the concepts are. You need to really understand your shit if you're gonna do it.
A lot of institutional. It's like you cannot translate Mavlab games without understanding Mavlabverse, right? So it's the same with Light. Unless you understand institutional knowledge of Light and Nightverse and how it works, you cannot translate Light games. Like,
all right, I wasn't gonna put a hit squad out on myself, but fuck it, I'll put a hit squad out on myself. There are also a lot of games that Ages did that are not Mavlab related, or really are just kind of very loosely Mavlab related. That I would also like to do at some point. Obari Naki Natsu is a definite one that is never coming out, that I would love to do, because it's really the last halcyon days of Japan before the beta come and fuck everything up. So I would very much like to do that. It's also a Phi Age game, which, by the way, Phi Age is like a off branch of Age that did a lot of other games that are kind of like, even like Magical Girl related almost. Like Shapeshifter was one that they did.
Like Anonymous
Pico was another one. No, Anonymous was under the main Ages brand.
Oh, fuck.
But that's a very different argument for another day.
Yeah. Just for those who don't know, Anonymous is Kobra's favorite game of all time.
It is not my favorite game. It is just a game that I thought was interesting, and I didn't read the tags, and now I'm being eternally harassed by B because I didn't read the tags.
You didn't read what was it?
There's a lot of very not safe for work tags that I don't think we should mention in public. So let's just leave it at that. Yeah, it's for those who know us, for those who have seen us yell at each other in Discord about it, don't talk about it. It's fine. We move on, even though people never let me.
We move on in this podcast, but you will never escape, Kobra.
I will never escape your wrath. No, that is very true.
But Owari Nakinatsu, right? It's the one.
Yes, Owari Nakinatsu, I think, really has a lot of value as a game, and I think definitely is a story that should be told, especially because it's sort of loosely connected to Mavlov and it's all of its properties. There are also a lot of early Ages games that are definitely up for grabs, I think. They're never gonna fucking do any of the Kimi Nozo fan discs. Might as well do those too. So, that's another opportunity as well, but again, that's a whole other can of worms. I have various feelings on Kimi Nozo that I promised I wouldn't talk about today, so I'm not going to. Exposing myself in public.
If you are interested in ever doing Mavlab games, remember that we do know, we are acquainted with the people who work on the Mavlab games officially, so
we are, but again, that's a topic for another day. We can we can figure that out at some other point if we need to.
Well, I mean, it's a you thing. I already promised that I would never work on Marvel-verse games anymore, so...
Right. And that makes sense.
It's Jover.
It's only Jover if you let it be Jover.
Oh,
and
I'll let it be Jover, don't worry.
Well, you will. I won't. That's different.
You'll never let it die.
Someday I might work on a Muv-Luv game, but I don't know when it would be. It would probably be, if I really had to pick one, I'd probably do Alternative Chronicles 4 or one of the Kimi Nozo fan discs. And that would only make sense after Kimi Nozo's out, so... Okay, eventually, maybe I'll go insane and do Kimi Ita. Who knows? I probably suffer a psychotic break while trying to do that game, but 2 million fucking emojis, Jesus Christ. Ugh.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a last question, and then we're gonna wrap up.
We should really wrap this up. Holy crap, we've been almost going for 2 hours. Ugh.
Yeah. I mean, you said 2 hours, so 2 hours it would be. Well, the last question is, what do you think? I'm gonna make it sound like I'm some PR guy or no. How do you say? Human resources guy. I'm gonna sound like a human resources guy. Where do you see fan translation in the next 5 years, Kobra? Is it gonna be better?
You're asking me those questions. Okay.
Yeah. Is it gonna be better, worse? Is it gonna be different? Just different, you know?
Oh, it's gonna be different. I think better or worse is ultimately up to your interpretation. So, what's going to ultimately happen in the next 4 to 5 years is a lot more projects are going to be localized. Conversely, a lot more projects are going to be released. Stuff that has been on the back burner that really hasn't been touched is going to be more up for grabs as it becomes obvious that companies aren't going to touch it. So, I think fan translation is, like I said earlier in this podcast, always going to have a place in the sort of visual novel universe and the visual novel fandom. There's always going to be a way for fans to contribute to the scene. Whether or not that means that most of them go professional, whether or not that means that, certain projects are going to be released that, would never have been released in the past. Maybe, there will be a lot more sort of quasi-machine AI translations that will come out that, people will say, oh, guess what? I did this through AI, surprise. I definitely see that happening. But, again, ultimately it comes down to I guess your subjective opinion of what the state of fan translations is now. Honestly, I think the state of current fan translations leaves something to be desired, but overall, I do believe that, yes, but overall, I think that the state of things going forward is fine. I think the current scene really does have a lot more dedicated, talented individuals in it than it did in the past, for sure, but there were ultimately different steps taken in the past, and things weren't, the quality standards weren't as high. The bar wasn't as high to please people. The bar is a little higher now because we have, not only companies that have produced really high quality translations, but we also have fans who have done really high quality work. So Days of the Scans is a perfect example of that, where I would argue that Trip is everything you would have wanted in a fan translator. But that's, to avoid sort of getting into stuff that I shouldn't talk about. The point is that, realistically speaking, I think that the fan translation scene going forward will be perfectly fine. There will always be a place for it, no matter how much technology invades, because there's ultimately just going to be certain projects that companies can't take over, and really I don't see it changing much. I just see games being different, and I see quality standards being different, and that's about it. B?
Oh shit! I had my
you muted yourself, didn't you?
Yes, I muted my mic.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Imagine, I was speaking. Well, I was just doing a funny joke about how you were saying that it was Jover and we were bound to disappear. You know how it is.
Well, okay. Ultimately, yes, there are going to be certain groups that disappear because they've completed their project. They've completed their stated goal. But are we going to disappear? I don't know. Maybe. We kind of have quasi-plans for continuing after Akatsuki. Who knows if we will, because it ultimately depends on B, because I can't do anything without B. But, end of the day...
The ultimate crux, it all depends on one person.
Well, it largely depends on one person. I'd argue there are a few people from our team that if you pull them out, we would ultimately be defunct. You were obviously one of them. Kebab is one of them. I am one of them.
Yeah,
so
I mean, look, now that the machine is oiled, then yes. But in a very rough sense of in a very rough sense, and I don't want to sound like a narcissist, but ultimately the guy who advances this or not is me. So
Ultimately, yes.
it's the issue, you know. It all depends on one person, which I'm saying that is not good, you know. That's what.
Don't worry, guys. I promised I'd get at least one more translation out of him. I will.
Well,
I don't know how, but I will.
Having said that, I think it's about time we close because it's pretty late over here.
Yeah, we've definitely gone over time. Sorry, everyone, for having to listen to my complete fucking rambles this whole time. But
we are
hopefully
not
you
sorry.
learned something. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
We are not sorry. We will not eat the bugs, and you will listen to the podcast. Anyways,
yes.
That's everything. And thank you for listening in. We'll see you guys on the next episode with I don't know who, I don't know when. Whenever I feel like doing one, and
You'll torture someone else. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, we'll coax someone else into coming. So yeah, see you guys another day.